Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Gray, I would like to start with you. You talked about two different ways in which this might proceed about Greenland becoming an insular area or a COFA agreement. I just wanted to ask, does that mean it's safe to assume that you don't think the U.S. should consider use of force or economic coercion to take control over Greenland?
Sir, I don't think the United States should use any sort of coercive behavior toward a NATO ally, meaning Denmark.
Yeah, and because this has implications even beyond just Greenland, beyond just our conversations with Denmark. Do you think that the U.S. talking about potential use of force or not taking use of force off the table in places like Greenland and Panama, that weakens our arguments when we're criticizing or going against Russia and China for their infringements upon sovereignty in Ukraine and or maritime boundaries in the Indo-Pacific?
Sir, I think what's critical is that the United States, the comments I think you're referring to had to do, in my view, with making sure that nothing was off the table in terms of if an adversary were to gain access to key parts of the Western Hemisphere. And I don't think we can take anything off the table to prevent an adversary from gaining control of key choke points. I think, obviously, in terms of allies and partners, we would never want to use military force or coercive means.
When it comes to this decision that you're saying that we benefit from having a COFA, when we would benefit from having insular partnerships here on this front with insular areas, I guess I wanted to just understand, why does it have to be that route? So, for instance, you talked about the Faroe Islands. Iceland is also up in that area. Would you recommend to us that we consider making offers to those places for those same offers of insular areas or a COFA?
I wouldn't, sir, mainly because they're not part of the Western Hemisphere. And I think this, if you look at the history of our relationship with Greenland, the history of our strategic concerns with Greenland, it's unique. And it really is, if you go back and look at the history of the United States in the World War I period, when we were negotiating with Denmark to retain, to purchase the Virgin Islands, one of the things that we did at that same period was we actually waived the Monroe Doctrine, one of the few times we've ever done this, and told the Danes that we had no objection to them gaining additional political control over Greenland, which wasn't fully established at the time, as part of our larger negotiations over purchase of the Virgin Islands. So this is clearly within the framework of the Monroe Doctrine, of hemispheric defense, of kind of traditional U.S. strategic conceptions of the outer perimeter of our hemisphere. I think this is very different from some of the examples you mentioned.
Well, I think Faroe Islands, Iceland, closer to the United States than Micronesia, Palau, other places where you said that we have COFA agreements to. I don't understand the difference.
Well, those, sir, I think are uniquely important because of their strategic location relative to the Indo-Pacific and relative to some of the scenarios that might be important for us in a military contingency. And you know that, I'm sure, the history of how we acquired those and why they continue to be so critical.
I guess what I'm just trying to get across here, and I also had conversations with Greenlanders over the course of the last week, is everything that we're saying here in this room, we're all in agreement that there's strategic value in Greenland, and we should be pushing forward on the icebreakers and so many other things that we should be doing. But I feel like we are getting in our own way by having this conversation about acquisition at a time when that's not even needed. I mean, I'll be honest with you, the Greenlanders I talked to were insulted that we were talking in this way about their own land, as if they're not even there, as if we can just purchase this and buy this, as if they are just an object. And that's what they said to me, that it feels like we're saying they are an object that we can just take because we are the richest, most powerful country in the world. So I just want to push back here, because there's so much that we can be doing without having to own Greenland. So much more scientific partnerships, so much more that we can offer when it comes to minerals and mining. We should just be pushing forward in that, regardless of what happens with a potential referendum going forward. So that if they do get to that place, we are already positioned ourselves as a strong partner. No doubt more we can do right now, but I just think that this is getting in our own way. And when you look at the polling, 85% of Greenlanders say they're opposed to becoming part of the US. 46% view President Trump's interests as a threat. If we are trying to solidify our relationship with them, especially in some post-independence position, we are burning those bridges. We are sowing sense of distrust right now that I think would make it even harder for us to be able to achieve that later. And with that, I'll yield back.